This talk shall be keyed to 3 words: thanks, remembrances, and hopes. I must tell you that this is not really a farewell talk. It is more like au revoir than adieu. I shall be teaching 1 course each semester in the honors program next year, so this is not the end of my song. Not the end of my song. In written evaluations of my courses over the years, one of the words most often used by students has been passion. That may be because I sometimes tend to serve up history on a fiery sword. But I suspect it is also because when I get intensely wrapped up in what I am describing or narrating or commenting on, my voice may crack or quiver. More often that happens when the sentiment is tender. So that's fair warning to you, given the nature of this occasion. I have been considering how I might keep from becoming emotional. One option is to prepare for a speech as Andrew Johnson did. The only problem was that he was tipsy when he gave his inaugural address. When he gave his inaugural address as vice president in 1865, Abraham Lincoln was appalled. Another option would be that of Jardine Matheson. They're the opium dealers whom I've been writing about for years. But their solution would have me standing here with glazed eyes and nothing whatsoever to say. The third option comes from Kermit the Frog, who told one of his fellow Muppets that nervousness on stage could be overcome if he visualized the whole audience as sitting there in their underwear. I've settled on Kermit's solution. You look good. And passion has sometimes been the driving factor when I have been promoting a cause that I believe in very strongly, even fiercely. I am glad for this occasion because I shall likely never have another chance to say to the college community what I am about to say. I know very well that I have been a pain in the neck to my closest friends. They have been tolerant. And to other members of the college, I know that at times I have been more than a minor annoyance. So, to those whom I have offended in one way or another, in what I have done and what I have failed to do, I'm sorry. It's a good thing that I believe in a forgiving God, for I hope that those whom I may have hurt in one way or another may echo the forgiveness of that generous God. Okay, enough. I don't want to paint myself as Richard III or Mephistopheles, and the gospel warns us against making a big show of penitence. Some of you have heard me say at various points over the years that I have 3 homes. The first is the White House with red shutters on Gardner's Neck Road, where Madeline and I have raised our family. The second is St. Mary's Cathedral in Fall River, which has been my parish for life. I have been a member of the choir there for 60 years, and I met Madeline in that choir. The third home has been Providence College. And this is where I begin to say thanks. This college has graced Grace's life. Many of the best people I have ever known have entered my life on this campus. I have to say thanks to those of you who have been so warm and kind to me. I can't name you because I would run the risk of leaving out someone who belongs on the list. But you know who you are, and I hope that you know how much you mean to me. Lest these comments become maudlin, I need to say realistically that PC has not been the New Jerusalem. We have had our family feuds. Some of them have been loud and long, and some of them have been marked by what Cardinal O'Malley has called Irish Alzheimer's, forgetting everything but the grudges. I shall be eternally grateful to PC for giving me the opportunity to do what I love, 5 decades, teaching history and crossing the bridges that link history to other fields, thanks to DWC. I realize that different members of the faculty may not think of teaching as their primary concern, but it has been the heart of my vocation here. Long ago, I determined that I would rather be an effective teacher than a well-known writer, and I have no regrets that I poured the bulk of my energy into preparing what I hope were good classes. I have to thank PC for its very substantial contributions to my pension fund. And for that security, I'm not kidding. There's a lot of money in there by now. Especially because when I began to receive TIAA benefits, the contribution of the college was 14%. It got cut back to 10, something like 15 years ago. 14% over 49 years amounts to a good nest egg. I have to thank the college for the scholarships granted to Mary Ann, Benjamin, and Elizabeth, which cumulatively must have saved us at least $250,000. And I have to thank the college for the sabbaticals, which I have generally spent in Cambridge, England. Moreover, I need to thank all the good students I have had who have enriched my life beyond measure with their receptivity, their challenges, and their friendship. I know that it is perennially fashionable among college and university faculty to complain about their presidents, and for students of every generation to complain about college food, even though they never had the pleasure of sewer trout on Fridays or hockey pucks on Saturdays, such as I had. And for everyone, faculty, staff, and students, to complain about parking. In my half-century here, there was never a shortage of brickbats to throw at Haas, Peterson, Cunningham, Smith, and Shanley. I even threw some of them. But I must say that I'm enormously grateful to those Dominicans and the whole Dominican community here for the past half-century for all that they have meant to me and to the college and to me. I'm particularly grateful to the current president, my former student, and our current provost, Dr. Lena, for all the kindness that they have shown to me, and generosity and warmth and respect over the years. The litany of thanks cannot end without an acknowledgement of the staff of the college. Secretaries, librarians, technical staff, IT personnel, administrative officers, the whole gang who make this place work and make the lives of professors easier most of the time. Part 2, remembrances. I normally illustrate my lectures with slides. I can't do that today because the slides are all in my head. For things that going back 30 or 40 years, I have to rely on my memory and paint word pictures for you. So let's assemble a collage. Shall we? It will be only a few pictures, but they will be some of the many images that remain so vivid to me. This album, this little album, will contain 7 word pictures. Photo number 1. Many of my fondest memories come from the 17 years that I spent as director of the honors program. It was much smaller in those years, maybe 18 or 20 students in each class here. That meant that we could know one another quite well, and beyond the intimacy of the classes, there were the expeditions to Trinity Square, or the Boston Symphony, or the RISD Museum, observances of special occasions, such as Robert Burns Night, graced with Mackay's haggis, or Christmas celebrations with a mass and a party. Our accommodations were modest. In the bottom of Stephen Hall, where the copy center is now. But we had some grand times there. I recall one Christmas when we decided that the theme of the dinner would be medieval. Terry Curran presided over the preparation of exotic recipes. It was best not to ask what was in them. We had a troupe from the Providence Recorder Society come to provide music that would encourage medieval digestion. And the coup de résistance for the evening was a production of the play of Noah from one of the medieval mystery cycles. We made use of a little bandbox theater called the Friar's Cell in the space now allotted to the copy center. And we had a cardboard ark with the ship's name, Cuddy's Ark, inscribed on the prow. We had original incidental music composed by Richard Brundage, which seemed to interpolate Blow the Man Down regularly and artfully, with an ensemble that included the Russo twins. Where are you? And had a New Yorker accented wristwatch-wearing figure of God, otherwise known as Peter Comerford, in a Dominican robe stashed up in the corner of the bleachers. And the person holding this extraordinary work of art together, the director, was a senior named Shanley. Photo number 2. I just lost it. Give me a chance to find out where I put, I've got too many pages up here, and there's a secret to that, but I won't tell you about it now. But I have to find photo number 2. That's not it. Here it is. Photo number 2. Same scene, different mood. The morning of December 13th, 1977. Dozen very solemn faculty gathered in the honors room because it was the closest retreat from the fire apparatus and the hoses outside of Aquinas Hall. Through the mid-morning hours, faculty drifted in because they could not think of someplace else to go. And we had a dreadful seminar with just one question: why? I remember it like a tableau of faculty who had to deal with the immediacy of the question of suffering. We were used to talking about that question around the Wilson table, but it normally was in a work of literature. Now, it was just outside the door, and we weren't very good at addressing it. And we kept asking God to give us an answer, and he was silent that morning. Photo number 3. Classroom of Aquinas I, a converted dining hall that served as one of the original homes of DWC classes. This must have been around May of 1978 or 79. Our DWC team was Rodney De La Santa, Father Fabe Cunningham, Father Tom Fallon, and me. I'm the only one still alive. We decided, I think it was my crazy idea, to dramatize our end of the semester review of first-year DWC themes. To give some zing to the review, we took on the personalities of 4 figures from the Renaissance: Machiavelli, Luther, Don Quixote, and Michel de Montaigne. It didn't matter that 3 of the figures were historical and 1 was fictional, because the 4 persons were buddies in a hospital who had arrived at the conclusion that they were the celebrities in question. We knew who we thought we were, and the students soon caught on. Having adopted the different personalities, we could discuss and argue and strut and parade in ways that were unthinkable in a normal lecture. Oh yes, we had softball gloves and a softball, which we tossed around the room with some frequency and surprising accuracy. It was not a humdrum end of the term review, and eventually it attracted spectators at the windows. For them, it was better than a trip to the zoo. We actually argued the big issues seriously most of the time, and the students stayed right with us, cheering, laughing, and occasionally even taking notes. We never did that again, but for one class of DW students, well, actually, 2 performances in back-to-back hours, it was a review they weren't likely to forget. Photo number 4. The anti-war movement of the late 60s and early 70s is one of the most memorable times for me because of the close association of students and faculty in a cause that was very passionate cause for us. I recall vividly occasions like the march to a rally at the State House that was on the night of the moratorium day, when the PC students and faculty teamed up with a similar group from RIC. The groups consolidated at the corner of Smith and River, and we marched in orderly files, linked arm in arm down Smith Street, chanting, "All we are saying is give peace a chance." There must have been at least 500 of us, maybe more. Even the bars on Smith Street emptied out, and their patrons stood on the sidewalk in amazement. The particular photo I have in mind involves the night of May 5th, 1970. 4 students were killed at Kent State by Ohio National Guard troops during an anti-war rally on May 4. A student called me to let me know that the anti-war student organizers here at PC were planning to call a strike. 2 nights later, there was an emergency meeting of the Faculty Senate in Aquinas Lounge. Outside the windows, there were students lining the building, several deep, to see how the faculty was responding. The Senate was sympathetic to the students and passed about 20 pieces of legislation, essentially closing down the academic life of the college for the remaining days of the term. I remember the tensions in that room with President Haas sitting near the podium and signing bills as they were passed to him by President of the Senate, D'Annunzio. And I shall always remember the faces of the students pressed up against those floor-to-ceiling windows, waiting to see whether the faculty was with them or not. We were. Photo number 5. Actually, the 1990s seemed to me a blur, as I was engaged in running the history department as chair for 6 years, and I was determined that I should spend a lot of time with my children as they grew into teenagers. We spent a sabbatical in Cambridge during 1993, and it was a magical time for us. Photo number 5 is not a picture of PC, but a picture of 2 guys from PC, Brian Barber and me, spending our sabbaticals as visiting fellows at St. Edmund's College. In the Easter term at St. Edmund's, there is a very fancy dinner named in honor of the 15th Duke of Norfolk, who was one of the founders of the college. Indeed, he put up the money. Not all members of college get invited, as much of the dining room is reserved for guests. When the invitations are sent out, the order of the day is, quote, scarlet plus decorations, close quote. That means tuxedo, academic gown, the scarlet hood of Cambridge dons, and decorations of any and all descriptions. Knighthoods, church awards, battle ribbons from encounters such as El Alamein or the Burma campaign. Dinner begins with sherry in the common room, and the first seating is by specified places. The wines are the best of the year at college, and there is plenty poured. The courses begin with starters, as they say in England, then a fish course, and next a meat course, followed by a recess to the common room for coffee while the tables are reset for dessert. Upon re-entering the dining hall, one finds that he or she is seated in a different location with different companions for the desserts and cheeses. And when the master rises to signal an end to the formal dinner, everyone proceeds back to the common room for chocolates with the college seal and port. Plenty of that, too. It's harder to get the chocolates than the port. Brian and I were fortunate to be invited to join the knights, bishops, senior fellows, big donors, and guests from other colleges. Things finished off between 11 and midnight. I did not have my car, as my next-door neighbor in Cherry Hinton insisted on driving us to St. Edmunds because she knew that there would be a lot of wine consumed that night. Indeed, as we prepared to leave the main door, one of the major donors could be seen sleeping on a sofa in the common room. And one of the highly respected fellows of the college was being poured into the passenger seat of her car by her protective husband. Brian and I began walking home. This is what I remember most. These two guys from PC walking down Castle Hill at midnight with our gowns thrown over the shoulders of our tuxedos. It wasn't yet the season for any of the May balls, so we were the only two fellows in tuxedos on the empty street. Discounting a few years of age and allowing for a change of university town, we might have been Sebastian Fleight and Charles Ryder stepped out of the pages of Brideshead Revisited. Past Magdalen College, across the bridge over the Cam, past the Tower of St. John's and down Sydney Street until we parted company at Christ College, we made our own little triumphal parade from the enchanted world of the Norfolk celebration back into the realm of ordinary life. For most of the night, we had been esteemed fellows from America. But when we got to Market Square and the clocks were reading nearly midnight, we became two blokes from PC who had been transported briefly to that other world. Photo number 6. The last two pictures of our collage are set back on familiar turf. Excuse me for one moment here. I'm working from two sets of papers, as you can see. And there's a trick here which I'll confess some other time. The last two pictures of our collage are set back on familiar turf. Number 6 is set on the lawn in front of the Ruane Center on that beautiful October afternoon when this new building was to be dedicated. In terms of elevated academic occasions, I think that this was about as close as PC gets to the Norfolk celebration. A month earlier, Hugh Lena had called me aside after my first class of the semester to let me know that the college was going to name a room in the new building after me for my years as director of the honors program, along with rooms for the other 4 former directors of the honors program and a room honoring Mario D'Annunzio for his long service as director of DWC and as professor in DWC and honors. I was stunned and humbled by the news. I had never expected such an honor. I was simply hoping to escape this spring before the assassins arrived. In the course of the dedication ceremonies, at which the eminent historian David McCullough was to deliver the main address, Father Shanley told the large assemblage about the dedication of the 6 seminar rooms. All of the other former directors of honors are now celebrating upon another shore. That left Mario and me. When the president called upon Mario and me to stand to be acknowledged by the crowd, the applause rang in my ears like the bells of St. Clement's and seemed to go on for a long time. I could only say thank you toward the various corners of the assemblage because I had temporarily forgotten all the other words I know. Photo number 7. A month later, I couldn't afford to be speechless because I had a different job to do. I have a very nice office on the top floor of this building. In fact, if it were available, I would rent it for the next year. I was glad to receive colleagues from other departments to have a look at my part of the Little History Enclave on the top floor. John Garrity, who is managing director of the Angel Blackfriars Theater, was one of the first to visit. But he had a specific reason to stop by. Out of the blue, he asked if Madeline and I would like to do a scene in the theater department's fall production, which was to be Neil Simon's The Good Doctor, based on stories of Chekhov. You should be guessing that my first response was fright. I knew that at least one of us was hallucinating. I told John that I would have to be careful about how I might broach this invitation to Madeline, as neither of us had acted since we were in high school. 2 months later, we were in costume, facing the blinding lights that make the audience entirely anonymous, and playing an older couple sitting on a park bench in 19th century Russia, singing a duet about whether any happiness was still possible in life. Neil Simon told us to say that it was possible, and so that's what we sang. It was a giant risk on John's part, but the student actors took us into their troupe with great warmth, and we found one Sunday that our picture was in the arts section of the Providence Journal with a caption saying that we were starring in The Good Doctor. We must have rehearsed our parts in the theater about 25 times. We rehearsed them at home several thousand times. Our 2 cats eventually passed out. Our entire theatrical careers amounted to 6 minutes times 6 performances. But we learned indeed that there is still time for happiness. The last word of this talk is hope. Are you wearing out? I'll be brief. I want to mention 3 hopes, 2 for PC and 1 for me. First, I hope that PC will always be a Catholic college, in reality rather than simply in name. For that to happen, we all have to honor the commitment that each of us has made to the mission of the college. Catholics can't take it for granted. People of other faith traditions, or even no faith tradition, have to respect it and promote it. And the Dominicans have to sustain their original commitment to the college. All of that is easier said than done, but that is one of my hopes. Second, I hope that PC will remain a liberal arts college. If you haven't noticed, the liberal arts college is an endangered species these days, as many different areas of academic specialization and professional development are pulling against that traditional model all across the land. I hope that PC will have the courage as an institution to resist that trend. Third, I hope that I will still be around to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the college. When I started here as a student, Lincoln was president then, I would never have thought the odds were strong that I would be around to see the fireworks in 2017. Now the anniversary is close, and I'm very hopeful of attending. Can you take one more short story? I have to find the other part of it here. I do seem inept, don't I? Many years ago, it was probably 1986, certainly before Madeline became the director of music at St. Mary's Cathedral. There was a major liturgy at the church. I cannot recall what the occasion was. Lizzie had not yet graced the family with her arrival, but Ben and Marianne were with us, way back in the right corner of the church. Ben was next to me, Marianne next to Madeline. He was about 2.5 years old, and she was about 5. The opening hymn was All Creatures of Our God and King. Many of you must know it. all creatures of our God and King. Each verse ends with a series of hallelujahs. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. When the hymn was over, the church was very silent for a few seconds as the last hallelujah receded. And the silence made it possible for the people standing around us to hear the little voice next to me singing, E-I-E-I-O. You see, he didn't think that song was over. And that brings me back to where I started this talk. Do you remember that old Sammy Fain, Irving Cahal song? I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places. That song is not over. And God willing, neither is mine.
Richard, you have a much better voice than I, so you don't expect any singing. But when I spoke with Angela Dills in October, I had no idea that these 2 hours would be so sacred and that a room would be baptized. Thank you very, very much, Richard and Jane. I'd like to bring Father Shanley up front to say a few words and to make a presentation.
I usually go first to try to avoid having to follow people who are tremendous speakers. So I think you've just lost your job, Joe, putting me on the spot here at the end after these 2 beautiful and warm and truly lovely orations. I was once at an event where a senior educator, a seasoned educator, was addressing a group of young educators, teachers-to-be. And the speaker began by saying, I want you to all close your eyes. And I immediately like, oh God, I hate that kind of thing. So close your eyes. I'm not going to make you do this. And so I'm sitting there, close my eyes, and he says, okay, I want you to think about your life. And I want you to think of the most influential people in your life. And they can't be your family, and they can't be your friends. Go ahead. So I closed my eyes, and I started thinking, and I had a litany. It wasn't hard for me to figure out who were those people that were the most influential and that I'm the most grateful to. And after about a minute and a half or so, he said, okay, stop. And he said, how many of you thought of a teacher? 99% of the room raised their hand. And I was one of them. And in fact, I thought only of teachers. My mind went through the teachers that had helped me become who I was. And there were a number of them who've had real powerful influences on me. Some of them sit before me. And I realized at that moment, I've never forgot that. I forget the rest of the talk. I don't know what he talked about. Nothing made a difference to me. I just sat there for the rest of that talk, basically giving thanks to God and kind of running through that litany in my head of all the teachers that had helped me be the man that I became. And I realized what a blessing in my life teachers have been. And I realized, and I'd known this before, the reason I became a teacher was because of the teachers that I had. I think those of you who share that vocation with me in the room, all of you probably were motivated in some way or another by wanting to do for others what others had done for you. And we celebrate the lives of two people today who did that for others, and I happen to be one of them. Now, to set the record straight, it was 76 when I came here, Jane. I wasn't here exactly when you came here. Connie and Marianne will share that. But this is exactly how I remember you. And same with you, Richard. This is around that era. I asked Richard what year, and he says 75-ish. I want to say it's 76. So in my mind's eye, the two of you will always look exactly like that, and still do. So I came here, Jane alluded to my father's business was advertising and PR. I never really thought I'd go into that business, but now I'm actually in it. And that's a whole nother thing. I wanted to be a lawyer. And I came to PC with that. I was going to go to PC for 4 years, then I was going to go to law school. And I remember my first encounter with the Dominican here, Father Cascran, was in the honors program orientation when he asked me what I was majoring in. At the time, it was political science. And he said, why? And I said, because I want to be a lawyer, and that's what you major in. He goes, no. You can major in anything and go to law school. And he said, well, what do you really love? I said, I love history. He said, well, then major in history. And I did. And I happened to have Dr. Grace for my Western Civ professor. I had Dr. Sickinger my whole freshman year as a history professor. I had Dr. D'Annunzio as a professor. I had great history professors here. I could tell a lot of stories about some of them, and maybe when we go in that room, we can share some of those stories. But after a little while in the first semester, I realized that I wanted to be a history professor, that being a professor was the best life that you could lead. And it's like, the heck with law, I'm going to be a history professor. Priest thing came later, and that's a talk for another time. But it really was as a result of the great history professors that I had, and especially Western Civ. I loved Western Civ. It blew my mind. And I realized that it was a life-transforming experience, and it's still a part of my life. Then second semester, I had dimensions of art with Jane. And Richard used the perfect word about Jane. Jane was so different, she blew my mind. I had never met a woman like Jane before. She was so different in the way her mind worked as a poet from anything that I was used to, that my head would spin. I'd sit there, most like history was linear in those days, and it was easy to follow the thoughts of a history professor. But Jane was like coming at you from all different angles and exposing us to all different forms of art and making us produce art on our own. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I have loved art my whole life, but never more so than from that time on. So I stand before you as well, maybe not in all your eyes, but in some of your eyes as a testament to what good teachers can do, and particularly to what these two teachers can do. And whatever else happens at Providence College, and I hope everything you hope for comes true, and that's why I do what I do, the heart of what we do here will always be teaching. That human encounter between a professor and a student, and what happens to both of them, because I've been on both sides of this, the changes that accrue to a relationship, to the minds shared together. That lies at the heart of Providence College. That will always and must always be the heart of Providence College. And the great thing, I've often described teaching and with the parable of the sower. You sow when you're a teacher, you never quite know what sticks, what reaps. And you get those experiences, and I think we've all had them, of students coming back 25 years later and saying, I remember when you said something about this, or that point you made there. You just don't know, and it's part of believing in the providence of God that it bears fruit in ways that you do know not. And you're lucky enough tonight, Richard and Jane, to have a little bit of a sense of, yeah, it did work. You sowed very, very well, and the seeds of that are here. And I guess as I was sitting there tonight, I was thinking my deepest hope, besides many of Richard's hopes, is for you young students, that someday, or that many of you will think about this as your vocation for your life. There is not a better life, I'm convinced of it. One of my colleagues when I was a Catholic once said, can you believe they pay us to do this? Then he said, wait, except the grading. They have to pay us for the grading. The rest of it is a luxury. So I hope that many of you, inspired by the examples that you've heard of today, will will come away with the idea that maybe God wants you to be a teacher as well. It is a rich and wonderful life, not just of the mind, but what we've celebrated today, of community, of shared relationships and shared friendships on this campus. This is why we built this building. You know, when you were mentioning the dedication center, and I think when this is all over, I'm done, I'm going to call Mike Wayne up and thank him again to have a setting for something like this and to enable us to celebrate all those years of wonderful teaching that has changed lives at Providence College. So it's my task at the end of this, and we're right on time. We can go to the reception right now. I have to hand out things. That's part of what I do as president of the college. So I would invite both you, Jane and Richard, to come forward. I'll hand you a ceremonial thing, and then we'll salute them. And then I think, Joe, do you want to say anything, or we just go? Okay, so let's do the formal part. Now, I've aged a lot too, so I can't even read the inscription without putting my glasses on. So I'll start with Richard. The plaque reads this way: Providence College, presented with gratitude to Richard Grace, PhD, class of '62, for inspiring young minds in the entire Providence College community during your distinguished career. Lecture Hall and Epilogue, April 3rd, 2014. Richard? Presented with gratitude, Professor Jane Lunan-Perrell, for inspiring young minds in the entire Providence College community during your distinguished career. Lecture Hall and Epilogue, April 3rd, 2014. Let's stand and then just walk out of here to the next room.